ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to pray silence for his worship. The worship from the Mayor of Reigate and Banstead, Councillor Roger Newstead.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to Nork Park. We're here today to commemorate and remember the events of 1917, in particular the Third Battle of Ypres, or Passchendaele as it became known. Following the Battle of the Somme in 1916 and the Battle of Arras in the spring of 1917, the Allies planned an assault on the German lines east of the town of Ypres in Flanders. An artillery barrage began on the 17th of July and lasted for 2 weeks. Although the guns failed to destroy the German defences, they did damage severely the system of dikes and ditches that for centuries had drained the low-lying farmland over which the soldiers were going to fight. On the 31st of July, at 3:50 in the morning, the infantry began to advance. Shortly after the initial assault, the worst rainfall recorded for 30 years began, turning the battlefield into a sea of liquid mud and flooded shell holes. Mud was the feature of the battle that the veterans were to remember in their later years. Men were drowned if they moved off the wooden duckboards. Horses and mules became bogged down, and the artillery and equipment they wanted at the front couldn't be delivered. And the equipment that was at the front failed because it became caked in cloying mud. The battle lasted for 3 months. Estimates of the casualties vary widely, but the Allies are thought to have lost around 325,000 casualties and the Germans 250,000. Many of the Allied soldiers were subsequently buried or commemorated at the Commonwealth War Grave Commission's cemetery at Tyne Cot, the largest of all British war cemeteries, with just under 12,000 graves and 34,000 names on panels around the walls. 42,000 bodies, or thereabouts, were never recovered. And only last year the remains of 2 British soldiers were discovered, identified and subsequently buried with full military honours. The battle saw the development of modern warfare, features of modern warfare that we would recognise today. The Royal Army Medical Corps, RAMC, had expanded from 9,000 on mobilisation in 1914 to a strength of 167,000 by 1918, and my grandfather was one of them. Blood transfusions were developed during the First World War, and the RAMC had prepared blood banks in anticipation of the Battle of Passchendaele. And I'm delighted to welcome members of 4 Armoured Medical Regiment who have joined us today. The RAMC are to be found wherever there is conflict featuring the British forces, as well as deploying for humanitarian operations, such as the recent Ebola crisis in West Africa. Since the Victoria Cross was introduced in 1856, 29 have been awarded to members of the RAMC, most famously to Surgeon Captain Noel Chavasse, the most decorated soldier of the British Army, who won a military cross in June 1916 at the Second Battle of Ypres, a Victoria Cross on the Somme in July of the same year, and a bar to his Victoria Cross just north of Ypres in 1917, when he was fatally wounded on the 2nd of August. The Battle of Passchendaele ended officially on the 3rd of December 1917. Passchendaele itself was taken by the Canadians in the November. In his memoirs of 1938, Lloyd George wrote, "Passchendaele was indeed one of the greatest disasters of the war. No soldier of any intelligence now defends this senseless campaign. He was, of course, a politician, and I gather he was at daggers drawn with Earl Haig. Many local men took part in the Battle of Passchendaele. Captain Apted of the 11th Battalion Queen's Own Royal West Surrey Regiment from Dudes Road in Reigate was killed in the initial assault. He's commemorated at our town hall in Reigate and on a church war memorial in South Park. His name also appears on the Men in Gate memorial in Ypres. Banstead War Memorial includes the names of the following men who were killed: George Blunt and John Taylor of Lyme Regis Road, John Gatland and Alfred Pigeon of Dyceland Road, Sidney Reigate, formerly of Sutton Lane, and William Wallace and Albert Waters of Banstead High Street. And I've just come from a commemoration service for William Wallace at All Saints Church in Banstead. A member of the 3rd Battalion Grenadier Guards, he was killed at the end of the first day's fighting. Ladies and gentlemen, could I ask that we now observe 1 minute's silence in memory of those of all nations who lost their lives in the Great War of 1914 to 1918, and for those lost in subsequent conflicts. As happened in the First World War, a whistle will be blown to signify the start and the finish of our period of silence. Thank you.
Great, Regate! Shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. And the going down of the sun, and in order, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Right, standards, peace!
When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today.
Banstead Borough Council, in commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Passchendaele, invites His Worship the Mayor, Councillor Newstead, the ceremony of plant this tree. The tree will grow as a living memorial to those who were lost and injured during the battle, and will be marked with a plaque to record today's act of commemoration. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our ceremony. I now invite you to return to the car park, where we'll serve light refreshments when you've had an opportunity to visit our exhibition trailer and meet members of 4 Army Men of Britain.